Dream Theater, when day and dream unite.
We finally get to start this legendary journey into the music of Dream Theater. In order to do that, we have to go all the way back to 1989. Now actually, we could go back a little bit further to the Majesty demos that took place prior to the recording of this album, but we may actually get to that a little bit later, whenever we're talking about, the cover albums that they have done, and, just tying up some general loose ends. We're going to start with the actual debut, the first album that was released in stores from Dream Theater, and that was entitled When Day and Dream Unite. It was released in 1989, and it featured somebody aside from James Labrie at the lead vocal helm. His name, Charlie Dominici. Now, a lot of people have criticized this album because of his vocal styles, but if I were to accurately attempt to put him, I guess put a nose exactly on what his style reminds me of, it's a lot of early Fates Warning with some early Flotsam and Jetsam, because remember, before Eric A.K. decided, not to do this anymore, he did employ a lot of highs. And basically it feels like a big-time preface to what a lot of 1990s era progressive metal or prog power metal bands were able to really accomplish. So if you think about bands such as Enchant and Labyrinth, just to name two, you kind of have a little bit of an accurate depiction as to what Charlie sounds like. People say that his overall style and his, range is very rugged. However, I actually think that it's that way for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, I think it's that way because of design, and secondly, I think it's because this is on a much different label than what Dream Theater has recorded on ever since this album. This is the only album that Charlie actually was on, and he was able to be in a couple of live shows after that, but soon was dismissed from the band. But let's talk about the music, because let's face it, for an album that for the most part is forgotten, this is actually pretty damn good. Now this album is very unique in many aspects. For one, this doesn't feature any song that is above the 10-minute mark, which is very, very rare, it would seem, for a Dream Theater album. It's very seldom that you really experience this. And for two, this is the only album that really that is from the 1980s, and also the only album that really seems to be forgotten by most casual fans. I think this is the case because of the fact that it is a different singer. It's not the lineup that everybody really imagines. However, whenever you examine the music, you recognize that there are a lot of similarities to this album to a lot of the efforts and work that would follow. One of the principal differences is in tonal quality, and there definitely seems to be a little bit more aggression on this record, with the exception of some minor points here and there. However, there is certainly a lot that can be said stylistically where this doesn't really, sound very different. Now, the efforts that would follow this album in the early part of the 1990s did have a little bit of a softer edge to it, a little bit more melody, whereas this one just seems to be a real riff fest that really is able to power its way through in, just a little bit over 50 minutes in length. But let's face it, this is still one heck of an album. This is still one that definitely deserves respect. For one, I really, really enjoy the Itzy Jam instrumental on this release. Now, I understand I just praised Charlie a lot, only to go to an instrumental, but this is definitely one of those stalwart pieces where you could almost really foretell that Dream Theater was going to have a fast impact on the progressive metal community. Even though this was an album that directly after it they left their record label and were left without a singer for a period of about 2 years, you had a feeling that these guys were going to come back strong, and even if this was their only output, it would almost seem like just a sad, sad story that just went tragically awry. Of course, we all know that really wasn't the case at all, but if it ended up being the only Dream Theater album in existence, well, for one, we wouldn't be doing this discography, or it'd be very short, and for two, well, there'd be a lot of music that we were deprived of. I think Charlie really showcases his brilliance in songs such as The Killing Hand. Now, some people criticize the higher elements of this, but I actually really like the fact that it goes with the music extremely well. Later on down the road, James Labrie actually sang this entire album live, and the initial reviews were that it really wasn't all of that good. It seemed like something was missing, and, well, what really is missing is that rugged element. This whole album has that rugged style, principally because of the recording style that was being done at this studio, considering this is completely and totally different and separated from that which they did. afterwards. However, songs like The Killing Hand really also showcase Dream Theater's ability to write a song. Each of these tracks definitely have an individualized feel to them, and the flow of it is actually very, very nice. And that's something that you can't even say about some modern metal bands that are out there today, where albums are instant classics to some people. Sometimes they just feel all over the place. This at least feels logical. This at least feels like it's, going from point A to point B, and it's kind of rocking your face off while it's, navigating that course. Also, I really enjoyed the fact that we immediately were able to tell from the start of this band's career that John Petrucci was really going to grow to be a really sought-after guitar player. He really showcased his dominance in the field, and he could easily really trade blows with the most efficient of thrashers at this period of time. He definitely had his speed from a very early age, and it was something that he was constantly developing. This album definitely exposed, well, maybe just a few ears to this brilliance, and probably gave a lot of other, famous guitar players of that time, and I'm looking at people such as Kurt Hammond, I'm looking at people such as Dave Mustaine, Kerry King, etc., of that time, a real run for their money. There are a couple shortcomings that this album possesses. For one, John Myung's bass really doesn't resonate very well. It seems to get blocked and clouded in the mix. This is something that really is extremely noticeable if you listen to this in high definition. In standard definition, it almost just feels like there's something thumping along with you, which is the bass, but it doesn't have that trademark feel where you can definitely hear it. Now, I think this record would sound really odd if it kind of had the overkill mix, where the bass was extremely thick, and something that is extremely resonant. However, for this to sound, it almost got the And Justice for All treatment, where it seems very muddled in the background. Something that does help to guide the overall texture of the music along, but just kind of doesn't make that impact like so many of his other bass lines in future albums really seems to have. Kevin Moore's parts are very solid, and of course Mike Portnoy is sounding good. His chops are definitely being developed as time progresses. Overall, for a debut album, I really think that this is one that is overlooked. It's one that's been overlooked by reviewers, it's one that's been overlooked in the media, it's been overlooked by fans, it's been overlooked by a lot of people. A lot of people will really refuse this album simply because it's not the creation, it's not the lineup that they know and love so very well and so very much. However, this is one that definitely needs some attention. It definitely requires a listen. And it's something that is available. It's very hard to find, but it's available on YouTube and by other means in order to listen to it. And if you can find an original, I definitely recommend, gobbling that up, because Lord only knows whenever you're going to see it again. Yeah. If you ever thought that you would say that a Dream Theater album was hard to find, well, yeah, it's true. Overall, I would say that this album is, not going to be anywhere close to my favorites from the band, but it definitely is no slouch. It's definitely not going to be one that's going to be mired at the very, very bottom of the list. In fact, I would probably put it maybe one or two pegs above. There are some albums that we're going to get to later on that for me just seemed, they almost seem like filler albums. However, this is definitely the type of debut that, the type of story also that could have really gone the other way. It could have gone wrong. It could have been the end. This could have been it. But instead, we have to traverse a couple of years down the road in order to realize that a revolution was actually coming. Something was actually going to happen to the band in the form of a replacement that was going to change the band forever, and was going to take their status from being unknown progressive newcomers to gold album winners, I suppose, if you want to call it that. Yeah, that's right. In just a couple of short years, everything was going to change. And Dream Theater was going to go from being virtually nobody to definitely somebody who was on the radar.